How's it going, everyone? I'm the Tumblemeister, here with the sole purpose of building better tumblers. In this video, we're going to talk about the differences between gymnastics tumbling technique and cheerleading tumbling technique. Let's get started. In this video, I want to detail 3 of the differences that I feel like create the biggest separation between gymnastics technique and cheerleading technique. Combining the best of both while getting rid of the rest that doesn't work for either is what I believe to be the path to the perfect tumbling technique. Now, the first difference that I want to go over, let's just call it perfection versus just throw it. In the gymnastics world, it's perfect or die. If you do a 98, it's basically close to failure. This problem is one of the biggest reasons why I feel like I actually see more mental blocks come from gymnasts than from cheerleaders. Even when gymnasts are learning a skill, they're not allowed the comfort of being able to do that skill wrong or making a skill feel more comfortable over doing the technique perfect over and over and over again. Gymnasts aren't allowed to be as free-flowing as cheerleaders, and they're not allowed to adapt as much because, again, the goal is on a specific technique, on a specific shape, that if the tumbler doesn't acquire that shape, then the skill was basically worthless. Even the way that they're trained to do some of the skills, I feel in context of just tumbling, is actually kind of wrong. But if you're trying to hone in on a technique, or you're trying to make the gymnast feel something that you specifically want them to do over and over and over again, you can teach anything with the right drill and the right words. The good side of this, though, is that gymnasts usually put almost all their effort every time they tumble. Their skills are hard enough to throw, and when there's that level of perfection that always has to be in their tumbling, you're not really allowed to slack, and you're not really to have that mental lapse. And if you're not focused on each individual part that's going to lead into perfection, you're probably going to make a mistake that you're not preparing for, which is going to make the skill twice as bad. Cheerleaders, on the other hand, have this throw it mentality. You can see kids go from learning a round off all the way up to throwing standing tucks within a year. Although there is a progression system in cheerleading tumblers are encouraged to progress at their own pace, or if there's a tryout coming around, they'll try to get whatever skills necessary to make the team that they're trying out for. The biggest problem with this is that cheerleaders do not train or condition or stretch as often as gymnasts do. Gymnasts are usually full-time. Even the part-time ones are at least spending 4 to 5 days, where at least an hour or 2 of that is focused on their conditioning and on their stretching. Cheerleaders at maximum put in about 2 to 3 days until competition season comes around, and then maybe they're adding an extra practice for the routine. The throw it mindset also leads to a lot of injuries, because sometimes there's a reason why your body doesn't want to do the skill, and if you're forcing it, now you're probably pushing your body past its limit. It does happen a little bit more prevalently in cheerleading than in gymnastics. I would say one of the biggest factors with this for cheerleaders is you have a lot of cheerleading tumblers working on skills that are a little bit higher than their bodies are capable of doing, not even their brains. This is strictly from a tumbler mindset. Gymnasts have to perform their way, cheerleaders have to perform this way. But in terms of how they tumble, I would rather throw the skill than force it to be perfect. In my mind, as a tumbling coach and as a tumbler, I would rather throw a skill at 70% quality or perfection, but 100% of the time, or every single time I have to throw it, over somebody who can do the skill at 100%, but only has the mental ability to be able to do it half the time that is required. The next big difference that I want to go over between the 2 tumbling techniques is based on how they train or what they don't train. We'll start with cheerleaders first on this one, and cheerleaders, they focus more on the running tumbling and standing tumbling, but they don't do a lot of front tumbling. The best cheerleading tumblers that do have front tumbling usually were gymnasts when they started out, either when they were younger or before they got into cheerleading. The only real skills that cheerleaders do that go forwards are usually entry skills like front tucks or front walkovers, where it's leading into other skills that go into their passes. Again, usually the quality level tumblers in cheerleading that can front tumble usually have some gymnastics background. In gymnastics, they focus on more front tumbling and back tumbling, but they don't focus a lot on standing tumbling unless you're talking about beam, which again is a totally different apparatus. Sticking strictly with floor tumbling, they don't do pretty much any standing tumbling unless it's a variation for show. Gymnastics also has a way higher tier of skills that the gymnasts and the tumblers in gymnastics have to basically progress to if they want to be considered elite. There's a lot of elite level skills that are pretty much required in gymnastics that are illegal in cheerleading. Triple spinning skills and double flipping skills are not allowed in cheerleading. This could actually be looked at as an advantage or a disadvantage. The advantages of working on higher level skills and being able to control your body and your mind to be able to do such precise skills in the air in such short amount of time is obviously invaluable for all tumblers. But there aren't a lot of quality coaches that know how to teach these skills or have experienced the skills even sometimes. And the problem with that as well is you sometimes have the gymnast now going through some of the problems that the cheerleaders go through, where they're working on some of these elite level skills a little too young, and their brains can't process some of the difficulties of what they're facing. So sometimes that gets forced on some kids that need some time to let some of the skills bake a little and allow them to get more control of their body. A lot of gymnasts are very young as well, so the problem is that when they go through their growth spurt or they go through that big body change when they hit puberty, their tumbling makes a big transformation. If they're learning some of these higher level skills in the middle of that, they have to almost learn the skill totally different with a new body. Safety is very big, and there's a lot of gyms that just don't have the equipment or the training or the coaches to allow their athletes to work on these skills. Cheerleading is catching up a little bit in terms of the facilities that they have and in terms of the equipment that the gyms use, so that way they can train their tumblers and their athletes at an equal rate as gymnasts do, without all the extra equipment that gymnasts need when they're doing their events. Air tracks, tumble tracks, rod floors, spring strips, all these help the cheerleaders spend more time on the actual tumbling part, whereas gymnasts focus pretty much, I would say, mostly on tumble track and spring floor. They might use rod floor here and there if the gymnastics gym has the rod floor. But for the most part, remember, tumbling and floor is only one part out of 4 for girls and one part out of 6 for men. Lastly, the different types of passes are also very different as well. Because gymnasts have to work these higher level skills, they're working a lot more power skills, they're working a lot more round off back handsprings into these double backs, full and back outs, Arabian double front skills. They do passes, and front tumbling is where you usually see it a lot more. But for the most part, when you think of a gymnast, you think of them running from that corner and getting a round off back handspring in, or some kind of lead into a power trick where they land and then they present. In cheerleading, passes and combos is way more common and actually encouraged for the tumblers. Even when you start at level 1 and you're pretty much just working front walkover, back walkover, and cartwheels, working combinations of those is where your last pass is going to come from, and doing front walkover, cartwheel, chasse, cartwheel, back walkover, and that's just the level 1 pass. Working all the way up to level 5 and level 6, now you're working punch front and Arabians and 1.5s and skills that probably started out in gymnastics, but now I would say cheerleaders use more because of the combos that they incorporate in their passes when they're tumbling in the routines. The biggest difference here, I believe though, is the standing tumbling. Standing tumbling for me is what a tumbler should create their foundation on. The problem with this is that a lot of gymnasts really only work on their technique with power, and the chance that a gymnast can over rotate or put power into a skill that they can't control is very, very high, because of, again, they have that perfect mentality on top of running and putting all this explosive power that they usually don't need. Because gymnasts have that perfect mentality again, and they're not allowed to adapt, this makes recovering from that crazy amount of power really, really hard and actually scary. Cheerleaders, the standing tumbling helps their running tumbling, because if I know that I could do a standing 2 back handstrings or even a standing 1 back handspring to tuck, lay out, or full, when I'm doing my pass or when I'm doing my running tumbling in the routine, I know I pretty much just need 1 back handspring to get my trick off, and I can put more technique into the other parts without stressing so much power. While I do wish that more cheerleaders did more front tumbling and that there were more qualified coaches to teach it in cheerleading, I still have to give the bigger nod to standing tumbling. Standing tumbling doesn't even just have to be from standing back handspring. It could be from just less steps. When you do a drop step round off, that's pretty much the same power as a standing back handspring. And I have so many gymnasts that could give me a 4-step round off back handspring full, but if I said drop step round off tuck, they wouldn't be able to do it, or they'd be very hesitant to. Take away my power, I still got my technique. Just take away my technique, I don't really have much else to go on but power, which isn't the safest thing to use all the time. Now, the last major difference that I want to go over between the two tumbling techniques is kind of the focus around what they're doing as tumblers. For cheerleaders, you have the focus more on the routine and what the tumbler is doing in the routine on top of the other parts of the routine, like stunting, like jumping, that they have to account for. In gymnastics, the floor routine is pretty much based around the 3 or 4 skills that they're doing. One thing I remember when I was in gymnastics and teaching gymnastics is how the gymnast has just so much time to prepare for what they're doing, and it helps them push that perfect technique because they have that time to go over what they're doing. And by the time they get to that level at competition, they've already trained it so much that there's a calmness that you see in a gymnast because of the comfort that they have on that floor, both from doing that routine over and over again, but from also the time allowed to focus on the skill in each part in that short routine. Gymnasts are also focusing pretty much only on the tumbling, other than the little dance and choreography sections like I said earlier. They don't have to pick up girls, they do have to jump, they have their leaps and their jumps in there, and so their main focus is to throw those skills and land them as best they can. In cheerleading, if you're one of the better tumblers in your cheer routine, that requires you to be good at jumps, good at stunting, either as a flyer or as a base back spot. You're gonna have to be in the pyramid. Put it all together, usually you have to do these skills with 15 to 20 other people on the floor. Regardless of how you feel about competing alone or not, you still have to account for other tumblers on the floor, people doing choreography on the floor, and for usually tight choreographed windows to do your routine, both in counts and in space on the floor. In cheerleading, there's more of a show aspect, which when you're watching the skills, you're like, oh my God, that's so cool, but you really don't appreciate the effort it takes to throw certain skills in a small spot or to pass through in a certain way where I'm sure when the tumblers were working on it, it wasn't that fun or it was probably pretty scary for them. But for the show and for the aspect of the routine, they'll work on it to basically make something that looks unsafe look pretty effortless. And again, now you have that high quality effect, not just with the tumbling, but with the choreography and with the way it's set up and how the tumblers are doing it. You put that gymnast in the corner and you let that gymnast go for their best passes. These passes have usually been trained for months, if not years ahead in advance. And so the gymnastics tumbler knows exactly what they're doing, exactly how they want to do it, and exactly what they need to do it. In a cheerleading routine, so much can happen. You can bump into somebody, there could be a stunt that comes down. I mean, even just feeling too tired to go for something and you have to water down your pass, that happens pretty much in every division at every competition. There's a lot of injuries that come in cheerleading, especially when the tumblers are training the skills, that come from pretty much just choreographical mistakes and from tumbler mistakes, not knowing where they're going or what count that they're going on. Sometimes it's even on skills that the tumbler is not even comfortable doing. Tumblers will sometimes spend maybe a month or 2 on a skill that they've been working on or that they feel that they have solid before they're now putting it into these crazy routines that have maybe 4 counts before they have to go. If they're not training it the right way and they're not pushing technique in these situations, then this is where the bad habits also come in, because again, that throw it mentality and the mentality of just doing the skill for the routine is more important than, to be honest, the safety of the tumbler. Trusting your body, especially in a competition environment, is understated and invaluable as well. And if you're forcing yourself to just do it almost in a bad way where you know you're gonna fall, there's no quality in that. There's no progress that can come from that. Gymnasts put their focus and put their time on the skills that they should be training for each level. And then when their routines are choreographed, they're built around the tumbler's passes so that the tumbler has the utmost focus and confidence right before they do those passes to significantly improve the gymnast's ability to land those skills with the utmost perfection. Understanding the parts that can and should be perfect, that's where that should be the focus of. But there are also parts that you have to trust and you have to allow them to happen naturally, because again, I believe that natural is the step above perfect. I would obviously combine the standing tumbling of cheerleading with the front tumbling of gymnastics and basically make my tumblers, which I do, work on all aspects of tumbling. Being able to throw not just the skill you're working on, but the inverse of that skill, the opposite of that skill, is only going to help your brain understand how that skill works, the symmetry of each part, not just going forward, but backwards. If we can make the easy perfect and then the hard a little bit easier and a little bit more natural, That's going to be one of the biggest combinations of both techniques that'll benefit both sides of cheerleading and gymnastics. Working front, back, running, and standing tumbling is only going to help the gymnastics tumblers and the cheerleading tumblers improve their tumbling tenfold. Can't be a part-time tumbler doing full-time tumbler things. Thank you all for watching, everyone. I hope you all learned something. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up, and I'd love to know, who do you think has the better tumbling, gymnasts or cheerleaders? Please subscribe if you haven't already to keep up with that tumbling wisdom every single day. Go check out all my other videos as well, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.